For 13 long years, the epic battle between the Dragon Keepers and the Monster Army had raged on, captivating audiences every Sunday. The weekly showdown had become a spectacle, drawing throngs of eager fans. The Chief Ranger Officer, ever the crowd pleaser, was busy mingling with fans, signing autographs, and taking photos. Meanwhile, two recruiters were in the shadows, trying to convince a seemingly ordinary guy to join the Ranger force. Intrigued and seeking adventure, the man decided to take the plunge. He exited the underpass, catching his first glimpse of the monstrous floating fortress looming above the battlefield. The arena was tense as the Monster Army made their entrance, greeted by a chorus of curses from the human spectators. The Monster Tiger, a fearsome leader of the Monster Army, locked eyes with the Dragon Keeper's commander. A brief, hostile exchange of insults ensued, thick with years of animosity. Suddenly, the monsters turned their fury on the audience, launching a brutal attack. Suzukiri, one of the recruiters from earlier, leaped into action, shielding the humans from harm. She quickly ordered her partner, Sakurama, to evacuate the spectators to safety. But the battle was far from over. A monstrous explosion rocked the arena, taking out two of the Rangers. This new monster was unlike any they had faced before. Stronger, more relentless, and terrifyingly immortal. One of the Dragon Keepers, known for his might, hurled a massive boulder at the beast. But to their horror, the monster shrugged off the blow, unfazed. It then transformed into a minivan, barreling through the Dragon Keepers, knocking them down like dominoes. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, the Dragon Keepers refused to give up. Rising to their feet, they decided to unleash their divine artifact, a powerful weapon of last resort. Just as the artifact was about to strike, one of the monster's minions made the ultimate sacrifice, throwing himself in the path of the deadly attack to save his master. An hour earlier, these same minions had been huddled together, mocking the humans for their supposed victory in the war. They laughed at the idea of a 13-year battle, knowing full well that the fortress had fallen within a year and that their leaders had been wiped out long ago. After a lengthy discussion, they decided to stage a comeback, determined to reclaim their honor. Amidst this chaos, Fighter D, one of the monster's most formidable warriors, found himself betrayed and beaten by his own comrades. One of his friends revealed the shocking truth. The entire battle was a charade, orchestrated by the Dragon Keepers to maintain the illusion of conflict. Disillusioned, Fighter D decided to take matters into his own hands. Disguising himself as the fake Tiger Boss, he re-entered the fray. Back in the present, Fighter D, after absorbing the full force of the divine artifact, stood his ground, reconstructing his battered form. He charged at the Dragon Keepers with renewed vigor, but they were too powerful, overwhelming him once again. Defeated and disheartened, Fighter D didn't return to the fortress. Instead, he wandered through the streets, eventually ending up in a dark alley. There, he transformed into a human, hoping to start anew. To his surprise, Suzukiri appeared before him, recognizing D as the very person she and Sakurama had tried to recruit earlier. They talked for a while, with Suzukiri asking if he had watched the Sunday showdown. D admitted that he had, and confessed his admiration for the Dragon Keeper's strength. Sensing an opportunity, Suzukiri asked if he was still interested in joining the Rangers. D, now more convinced than ever, agreed, his decision fueled by the commentators' endless praise for the Dragon Keepers. The stage was set for a new chapter in the battle between good and evil. D walked into the Rangers' HQ, ready to be recruited, and was greeted by Suzukiri and Sakurama. Sakurama, overjoyed to see D, rushed over and hugged him tightly. But D's mask began to crack slightly. Fighters like him had fragile bodies compared to surface dwellers, and the embrace was more than he could handle. Noticing the tension, Suzukiri invited D to join them for lunch. Meanwhile, back at the monster fortress, the creatures were indulging in their usual time-killing activities when a helicopter suddenly appeared on the horizon, carrying the Dragon Keepers. The monsters braced themselves for another battle, but were momentarily relieved when the Keepers announced they hadn't come to fight. Instead, they demanded the traitor who had broken the truce to reveal himself. The monsters looked around but informed the Keepers that D hadn't returned since the last battle. As a precaution, the Dragon Keepers left two of their subordinates, Aran and Ruri, to keep an eye on the fortress. Fighter C, one of the monsters, decided to stand up against this intrusion, rebelling against the Keeper's invasion of their privacy. But before he could make a move, The Red Keeper swiftly took him down with a single punch. C quickly regenerated but stayed down, and A, their leader, was left begging for forgiveness, their pride shattered. The monsters had no choice but to live in shame. Back at lunch, D ate with little regard for manners, his thoughts distant. Suzukiri chatted with him, explaining that the Dragon Keepers didn't live at HQ, but in various garrisons scattered throughout the city. As D listened, he almost let the truth slip about the war, but he caught himself just in time. Suzukiri and Sakurama exchanged confused glances, muttering something about a video that suggested the war between monsters and keepers was all just an act by the Rangers. D realized that neither of them knew the full truth. Their conversation was interrupted by a woman and her child, who approached to thank the Rangers and ask for a photo. Suzukiri and Sakurama excused themselves to return to duty, leaving D deep in thought. As the child from the other table walked past, D called him over, showing him the photos. Later, D reconstructed himself to look like Sakurama and infiltrated the Red Garrison. He carried a letter from Suzukiri, intending to deliver it. Upon entering the room, he found it filled with Red Keeper's subordinates, who immediately started to bully him, mistaking him for the real Sakurama. D was almost exposed, but Suzukiri arrived just in time to save him. As they escaped the room, the real Red Keeper suddenly appeared before D, shocked. D's disguise began to falter as his face was revealed. He instinctively wanted to attack, but Suzukiri quickly pulled him away. In a secluded alley, Suzukiri asked D for the knife in his pouch. Without hesitation, D handed it over, only to be knocked down by Suzukiri. As he began to reconstruct himself, Suzukiri revealed that she had been covering for him all along, knowing he was too weak and vulnerable to survive among the Rangers. She then proposed that D join her in taking down the Rangers themselves. Before D could respond, the real Sakurama appeared, informing Suzukiri that a mysterious fighter had appeared nearby. It was none other than Fighter F. As Suzukiri turned back, D had already vanished. D reappeared at the scene where F was being bullied by the Red Keepers. The tension escalated quickly, and the Red Keeper decided to end F with the divine artifact. D was paralyzed with shock, unable to intervene as the brutal act unfolded before him. As D watched the remnants of Fighter F vanish into thin air, memories of the events 12 years ago flooded his mind. He clenched his teeth, frustration building within him, and began walking purposefully across a nearby bridge. Sakurama, sensing something was wrong, called after him, asking him to stop. "Did you know that monster?" Sakurama asked, his voice tinged with concern. "Your reaction says it all. Whatever you're planning, you need to stop. Monsters will never win." D was momentarily stunned. He had overheard everything Sakurama and Suzukiri had discussed just minutes before. But now, Sakurama's tone suddenly softened, and he extended his hand to D. "Join us," Sakurama urged. "Together, we can build a perfect society where humans and monsters can coexist." But D, his resolve hardened, declined the offer and disappeared into the air. D returned to Suzukiri, seeking her guidance on how to defeat the Rangers. Suzukiri revealed that the key to their downfall lies within the divine artifacts, 5 powerful weapons designed to eliminate even immortal monsters. She explains that while the Dragon Keepers appeared strong, they were an incomplete organization, dependent on their top 5 members. The plan was simple: steal the divine artifacts during the Sunday battles when the Keepers wouldn't use real weapons in their staged fights. Taking on the appearance of the Red Keeper, D infiltrated the building with Suzukiri's guidance. Though he couldn't shake his suspicions about Suzukiri's motives. Why would a ranger help a monster? He pressed on. As D continued his mission, he encountered Tokita, the bully who had tormented him before. Despite Tokita's attempts to provoke him, D remained calm and focused. He finally reached the vault room and laid his hand on the Red Keeper's divine artifact. Just as he did, a bullet pierced his skull. As his head reconstructed itself, Tokita revealed himself, smugly admitting he had suspected an impostor all along. Tokita continued to bully D, repeatedly blowing his head apart and taunting him. He grabbed the divine artifact, ready to use it against D, but froze in terror when he saw the dynamite in D's hand. Seizing the moment, D knocked Tokita down and finished him off. With the artifact in hand, D headed to the terrace as planned. But just as he reached his destination, the Red Keeper appeared before him. D tried desperately to land an attack, but the Red Keeper was too powerful. He was merely biding his time, waiting for the helicopter to arrive so he could unleash his full strength. Soon, the other keepers appeared, joining in on bullying D. They had different plans. They wanted to use D as a pawn to maintain their public image, but D refused to play along. Frustrated, the Red Keeper ordered the Blue Keeper to eliminate D. As the Red Keeper moved forward to reclaim his divine artifact, he suddenly noticed something was wrong. The artifact began to vanish, disintegrating just like the fighters. Shocked to his core, the Red Keeper realized his precious weapon was gone. All the Dragon Keepers and their assistants gathered in the sacred banquet room. Tension thickened the air as the Blue Keeper grew furious when Suzukiri arrived late without offering an apology. His anger boiled over, and he began to charge up an attack. But before he could unleash it, a tiny flying monster, Draggy, the Ranger Force's mascot, fluttered between them. Irritated, the Blue Keeper started to crush Draggy in his grip, but the Red Keeper quickly intervened, stopping the situation from escalating further. The Red Keeper turned to Suzukiri, ordering her to apologize for her tardiness, which she reluctantly did. As the tension eased, the Red Keeper revealed a shocking truth. He had lost his divine artifact. The room fell into stunned silence. The weight of the revelation hit everyone hard, especially when Red's subordinate boldly suggested that Red should resign for such a colossal failure. At first, the Red Keeper pretended to consider stepping down, playing along as if he would hand over his position. But in a sudden, brutal twist, he punched his subordinate into the wall, killing him with a single blow. Meanwhile, the Blue Keeper, still in disbelief that Fighter D had survived the explosion, went to investigate the scene. He took one of his subordinates with him, ordering a search of the area around the floating fortress while he checked inside. D had indeed survived the blast, but he was in a dire state, with a gaping wound in his stomach that refused to heal. Out of nowhere, Sakurama appeared and whisked D away to a safer place. He brought a first aid kit, offering to help, but D, distrustful of all rangers, angrily kicked the kid away. Despite his condition, D managed to heal the wound, though the pain lingered. Sakurama watched in awe at D's shape-shifting abilities, which sparked a deep, conflicting sympathy within him. Raised by a father who believed that even monsters had a right to exist, Sakurama had always struggled with these feelings, especially after his family was killed by a monster who claimed to be a god. Still, D didn't trust Sakurama and urged him to leave while he could, boasting that he had already defeated Tokita, the so-called panda guy. Sakurama was shocked, realizing that Tokita was the 5th strongest member of the Red Squadron. D chuckled, blushing slightly as he bragged about his victory. Through clever wordplay, Sakurama managed to trick D into revealing his name. Just as Sakurama was about to ask D for a favor, they heard someone approaching. Thinking quickly, Sakurama went out to divert the junior second-rank ranger in the opposite direction, buying D some time. The ranger grew furious with Sakurama for wandering around without reporting the fighter's location and warned him not to mess up again. Suddenly, D appeared to help Sakurama, boasting about his strength. D launched an attack on the ranger, but it barely caused any damage. The ranger then activated a replica of the divine artifact and retaliated. D managed to dodge every strike, even snatching the replica from the ranger. But as soon as D grabbed it, the weapon burned his hands. Sakurama quickly devised a plan, pretending to take D as a hostage to force the ranger to surrender his weapon. However, the ranger saw through the ruse and was about to strike both of them. In a desperate move, Sakurama played on the ranger's mind, convincing him to give up the weapon. The ploy worked, and the weapon ended up in Sakurama's hands. In a shocking twist, he used it to behead D and kicked his body off a cliff. But to the ranger's surprise, when he returned to base with Sakurama, D was still alive, disguised under Sakurama's mask. It had all been part of Sakurama's plan to let D live in his place and continue his search for the answers he sought. After the banquet, the Pink Keeper approached Suzukiri with a friendly invitation. "Would you like to join the tea party I'm hosting? You can bring Sakurama along if you'd like," she offered with a smile. But Suzukiri had other plans. She politely declined, unable to resist mocking the Pink Keeper for her apparent interest in Sakurama. Meanwhile, D had accomplished little on his first day and returned to Sakurama's room. When Sakurama had saved D, he had asked for a favor: to uncover the truth behind the ongoing war. Sakurama wanted the same, but his attempts to contact news agencies had led to him being attacked. He feared that if he dug any deeper, his only remaining family member might also be put in danger. Before leaving, Sakurama mentioned that he had important documents stored on his device that might help Dee. Unfortunately, Dee accidentally broke the laptop while trying to access it. To fix the laptop, Dee went to the maintenance office, where the officer agreed to help but asked for a favor in return, distributing ID cards to other independent rangers. While handing out the cards, Dee learned from one of Sakurama's friends that no one could leave the underground facility until their training was complete. Dee wandered around the cafeteria, meeting a variety of odd fellow rangers. One cadet almost attacked him due to a bad attitude, but Dee managed to keep his cool. As he was leaving after completing his task, he was stopped by Sakurama's older sister, Sizura. Caught off guard and unsure of what to say, Dee panicked and fled. Returning to Sakurama's room, Dee heard a strange noise coming from a cabinet. Upon opening it, he found another fighter hiding inside. The fighter, startled, was about to attack until she realized it was just Sakurama. Confused and muttering nonsense, she calmed down only after Dee revealed his true identity. Recognizing a fellow fighter, she knelt in respect. Just then, Sizura knocked on the door, asking if everything was all right. The fighter inside the cabinet tensed, considering an attack on Sizura, but Dee stopped her, knowing it wasn't the right time. Sizura entered the room with some apples, intending to share them with Sakurama. She struggled to cut the apples, revealing her physical weakness, and urged Dee to quit the Rangers for his own safety. As Sizura stepped out to take a phone call, the hot-headed fighter in the cabinet grew restless, banging on the doors in frustration. Dee, knowing he couldn't hold her back forever, devised a plan to let her go on a rampage, using the chaos to his advantage. As she raged, Dee swiftly beheaded her, locking her head inside a box to prevent her from causing any more trouble. When Sizura returned, she continued to plead with Dee to quit the Rangers, unaware of what had just transpired. After she left and made her way home, she spotted some thugs harassing a woman. Without hesitation, Sizura transformed back into the Pink Keeper to save the day. Meanwhile, Dee allowed the fighter's body to heal, and once she was restored, she was surprisingly calm. She looked at Dee and told him with a resigned sigh that he could do whatever he wanted. After completing their final exam training, the Ranger cadets were taken to face the real final test. The cadets were divided into 5 groups based on their training performance, and much to his dismay, Dee found himself in the red category alongside a student he despised. To pass the exam, each group needed to defeat at least 5 monsters, portrayed by Rangers on active duty. Each monster carried one of 5 differently colored keys, and the cadets had 3 days, with only 30 minutes each day, to retrieve these keys. As the test began, Dee suggested they hide and plan their strategy, but his teammate insisted on charging in head-on. Their argument was cut short when Suzukiri appeared, though to her surprise, she had stumbled upon the Yellow Squadron instead of her intended target. The cadets were stunned to realize that the monsters they were meant to fight were actually junior first-rank Rangers. Just then, the Red Ranger appeared out of nowhere, ready to attack Dee and his team. Dee's heart sank when he recognized the Red Ranger as none other than Tokita, the very Ranger he had fought before. Suddenly, a car crashed into Suzukiri, driven by yellow cadets, but she effortlessly saved herself, unfazed by the impact. He frantically searched for Tokita, only to find that his teammate had already engaged him in battle. Furious at being mocked for his past defeat by a mere monster, Tokita ruthlessly beat down the cadet. Dee joined the fray, pulling out his dragon gadget gun, but his aim was poor. His teammate tried to assist, but was of little help. Dee, thinking quickly, fired at a nearby fire extinguisher, creating a thick smoke screen to cover their retreat. But his teammate, Cheyenne, refused to back down and continued to fight. Cheyenne was on the verge of being defeated when the Green Ranger crashed into the scene, forcing the other cadets to gather and team up against both the Green and Red Rangers. Using the smoke as cover, Tokita relentlessly tried to attack Hisui, another cadet, despite her warnings. Fed up, Hisui decided to show Tokita his place, breaking his arm with a swift move to teach him a lesson. Taking advantage of the confusion, Dee began shooting at Tokita while darting around in the smoke. Just when it seemed like Tokita might be taken down, Hisui suddenly appeared and took out both Tokita and Cheyenne with brutal efficiency. She turned her attention to Dee, about to strike him down as well, when a blue cadet fired at her, saving D at the last moment. Another cadet managed to pin Hizue down, giving D the opportunity to refocus on Tokita, determined to take him out once and for all. The cadets were exhausted, their spirits waning as they faced the grueling reality of surviving 2 more days, like the one they had just endured. One cadet finally had enough and quit, leaving the others to check their wounds and contemplate their situation. As they talked, D's eye caught a glimpse of someone familiar. XX, darting down the hallway. He quickly made an excuse and slipped away to follow her. D managed to catch XX and lock her back in his room. Cheyenne, sensing something is off, approached Guy when he returned and started a conversation about why he had joined the Rangers. During their talk, D began to piece together what Cheyenne was hinting at, particularly when D remembered seeing the red key strapped to Tokita's back. It dawned on him that only one member from each squad could pass, and this realization hit hard. Later, the maintenance officer came to check on Tsukurama's room and discovered XX. Though XX tried to attack him, the officer overpowered her. Surprisingly, instead of reporting her, he decided to let XX escape, revealing his disdain for violence and war. Cheyenne then shared with D his motivation for becoming a ranger, revenge for his elder brother, who was killed by monsters 4 years ago. D was shocked by this revelation. It didn't make sense, as all the major monsters had been defeated 13 years ago. Even the rangers didn't believe Cheyenne's story, leaving D with a troubling mystery to ponder. Meanwhile, the maintenance officer attempted to talk to XX when suddenly the monster boss Peltrola appeared and shot him down, having arrived in response to the distress signals sent by XX. On the second day of the test, Cheyenne was late. The Blue Squad managed to secure their key early on, and the Blue Ranger had a brief conversation with D, subtly hinting at Tokita's location. When D arrived at the scene, he found that Cheyenne had teamed up with one member from each squad to defeat Tokita and take the red key. Realizing they had been abandoned by their squads, 5 cadets decided to join forces and steal the remaining keys from the other teams. During this time, Kogurama accidentally discovered D's true nature when D inadvertently hit him while trying to recruit him for their team. The 3rd and 4th battles were fierce, involving the Pink and Green Rangers. Now, only Suzukiri remained as the last target. They surrounded her, launching a combined attack to seize her key, but she effortlessly defended every move with her shield. Suzukiri began to play mind games, attempting to break the yellow cadet mentally, but D managed to land a blow on her, surprising everyone. Amused and wanting to make the 3rd day more interesting, Suzukiri handed over her key to D, and then questioned them about their reasons for wanting to become rangers. Just as they were processing Suzukiri's actions, the rival team appeared out of nowhere, snatching the yellow key with ease. Before D could react, the bell rang, signaling the end of the day's test. Meanwhile, Peltrola was on a rampage, tearing through the base and leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. As the 2 cadets from the opposing team were celebrating their victory, D approached them slowly, pretending to join in their congratulations. In a swift move, he snatched the yellow key back, leaving them stunned. Their shock deepened when the rest of D's team arrived to inform them that the 2nd day wasn't over yet. Without hesitation, D tossed the yellow key to Yamato and began defending him. The opposing team made a desperate attempt to reclaim the key, but just as they closed in, the bell rang, and the key remained firmly in Yamato's possession. Meanwhile, Peltrola was wreaking havoc on the officers around the base. Izome, seeing the chaos, jumped in to save one officer on her own. But her efforts were in vain when the officer chose not to flee and was brutally killed by Peltrola. Instead of retreating, Izome decided to stand her ground. She unleashed her divine artifact replica and charged at Peltrola, determined to take him down. During their downtime, D and his teammates discussed which squad they truly belonged to. Their group consisted of only 4 members, which led them to think about the missing 5th member, Shippu. When 2 of them left to find Shippu, Kuroma confronted D, questioning why someone like him, clearly an enemy, was at the Rangers' training ground. D tried to intimidate Kuroma into silence, but Kuroma wasn't fazed, sensing that D wasn't truly a bad guy. When they arrived at the gym, they were shocked to find Shippu completely drained of energy and motivation, his once muscular body now frail. Koguma tried to encourage Shippu by pointing out how D had managed to unite them and secure a key. Shippu remained despondent, fearing his next opponent, the pink junior first-rank Nadeshiko, who was built like a mountain of muscle. But Koguma revealed that Nadeshiko no longer had a key. It was with the other team. This news reignited Shippu's determination, and his muscles seemed to return as his motivation soared. Koguma, thinking about his future, considered joining the Yellow Squad, given his technical skills. As he crossed paths with D, he thanked him for being supportive despite being a monster. On his way out, Koguma stumbled upon Peltrola attacking Azome. Seeing her in dire straits, Koguma leaped into action, throwing Azome into an elevator to save her before launching an attack on Peltrola. But before Koguma could land a decisive blow, Peltrola knocked him down. The fight left Peltrola confused and wounded, unable to comprehend how a junior first rank could inflict so much damage. He retreated to an empty space to recover. The junior first rank rangers soon discovered the presence of a boss monster within their base. As the next day began, XX joined D's team disguised as Koguma. The day's battle commenced with one-on-one matches, and Cheyenne and D faced off against each other. D unveiled his dragon gadget, now modified by Koguma, making it more powerful than Cheyenne's weapon. The gadget was now in burst form, giving D a clear advantage. Cheyenne fought hard, but found himself outmatched, with D emerging as the last man standing. D then tried to reason with Cheyenne, explaining that his brother couldn't have been killed by a boss monster, as none were left. He revealed that even the Dragon Keepers had looked down on Cheyenne's brother, dismissing him as weak. This only fueled Cheyenne's desire for revenge, not just against monsters, but also against the Rangers. Cheyenne, recalling the last time he saw his brother, suddenly stood up and began smashing his gadget against the debris. The gadget shattered and released a burst of energy, transforming it into a weapon on par with D's. Now, the two stood on equal ground, ready for the next phase of their battle. Azome, battered and on the brink of collapse, was found by Draghi-kun. With her strength fading, she urged Draghi to inform the Blue Keeper about the dire situation. Meanwhile, D's team was steadily overpowering Cheyenne's team. Urud was taken down by XX, who was cleverly hiding behind Koguma's body. Koguma then appeared before Yamato, who was dominating his opponent. XX was on the verge of finishing Yukino when Yamato intervened, sacrificing his ki to save her. Koguma, indifferent to who won or lost, was only interested in securing the keys. Shippo, who had been fooling around, suddenly found his gadget's energy depleted. His opponent began firing her gun at him, but to her shock, the shots didn't affect him at all. Shippo prepared to counterattack, but the enemy surrendered, knowing that if she didn't, she'd be dead. With that, Shippo secured the pink key. Meanwhile, Ishikawa fell into Yusakubo's trap, which involved a suicide explosion to buy time for Shippo to arrive and handle the rest. However, the explosion left Yusakubo unable to move. He and Cheyenne were locked in an intense battle, both gearing up for a final, decisive attack. But just as they were about to clash, Koguma suddenly appeared, pinning Cheyenne down and demanding he surrender his ki. As Azome struggled with her last breaths, memories of her early days as a junior first rank flashed before her eyes. She recalled how the Blue Keeper had never taken her seriously, refusing to acknowledge her as a partner. Just as she was about to succumb to her injuries, the Blue Ranger arrived, rescuing her at the last moment. Blue's powerful attack washed away Cheyenne, XX, and D, scattering them in different directions. The Blue Ranger quickly discovered Koguma's true identity and pointed his weapon at her. D watched as the Blue Keeper relentlessly pursued XX. Intent on avoiding the use of his divine artifact, the Blue Keeper chose to torture XX instead, stabbing her repeatedly with metal pipes to extract information about the boss monster. XX refused to talk, enduring the brutal assault. The Blue Keeper was on the verge of finishing XX when a trailer suddenly lurched forward, knocking him down. It was D, who had moved the trailer to create a distraction, giving XX a chance to escape. The Blue Keeper, undeterred, went after XX again, but D intervened, pretending to protect his comrade Koguma. The Blue Keeper blocked D's attack with his gadget, but D's was more powerful, forcing the Blue Keeper to barely manage a defense using his shield. Enraged, the Blue Keeper activated his divine artifact. XX, now transformed back into Koguma, was struck by a powerful attack from the Blue Keeper, which prevented her from regenerating. Desperate, XX used a car to ram into the Blue Keeper, but it didn't even scratch him. The situation was growing increasingly dire, and the fate of the team hung in the balance. Blue Keeper demanded XX lead him to her boss, but she stalled, hoping to buy time. Her hesitation irritated the Blue Keeper, who punished her by driving another hole into her with his divine artifact. He was about to inflict even more pain when D intervened, blocking the attack and reminding the Blue Keeper that, even as their enemy, XX was as good as a captive and should be treated with respect. To the Blue Keeper, however, these fighters were mere pawns, unworthy of such regard. D warned him not to underestimate them, as they could cost him his life if he let his guard down. XX, under duress, led the Blue Keeper to the room where Peltrola was recovering. Peltrola, still in his tree form, attempted to negotiate, but the Blue Keeper attacked without hesitation. The tree's fruit fell, hatching multiple offspring of Peltrola. Thrilled by the sight of so many boss monsters, the Blue Keeper unleashed his divine artifact, killing monster after monster. However, no matter how many he destroyed, more continued to hatch, leaving him unable to stop them until he found the real body of Peltrola. XX approached Peltrola to introduce D, who had been suffering in their absence. Sympathetic, Peltrola turned to acknowledge D, only to be pierced by D's dragon gadget, shocking both XX and Peltrola. Furious at this betrayal, XX pinned D down, feeling utterly betrayed and heartbroken. In the meantime, the Blue Keeper located Peltrola, who was still not fully healed. The bodies that the Blue Keeper had been fighting were all real bodies of Peltrola. As long as even one survived, Peltrola would continue to live. As Peltrola tried to escape through a hole created by the Blue Keeper, he was knocked down by junior first-rank rangers. Desperate, Peltrola ordered XX to protect him while he charged an attack, but she couldn't hold out for long and was eventually taken down by the Blue Keeper's relentless assault. D, too, lost consciousness while trying to protect her. In his unconscious state, D dreamed of achieving world domination, only to see his friends killed by Peltrola. In this dream, Shukurama appeared, urging D to abandon his pursuit of power. D awoke to find XX struggling to recover and Peltrola still on the run. Meanwhile, Cheyenne and his team were recovering from their injuries. His teammates suggested taking back the keys, but Cheyenne insisted on sticking to the rules. Suddenly, Yukino encountered the boss monster but quickly retreated. Kurusu spotted Peltrola's remaining head and began chasing it down. Peltrola, cornered, was about to strike Kurusu when Cheyenne intervened, taking down one of Peltrola's clone heads. Other cadets soon arrived on the scene, and Urabe appeared out of nowhere, determined to avenge Koguma by attacking Peltrola. The cadets banded together to fight Peltrola, with D joining them. Conflicted but driven by his own ideology of achieving his goals at any cost, the battle reached its climax, each side pushing their limits in a desperate struggle for survival and dominance. The cadets and D were locked in a fierce battle against the relentless monsters, but despite their best efforts, their gadgets proved useless against the formidable Peltrola. The only exception was D's burst form gadget, something Peltrola had never encountered before. Intrigued, Peltrola tried to seize the gadget, but D swiftly passed it to Ishikawa, who barely dodged Peltrola's vicious attack. D then ordered Ishikawa to keep passing the gadget among the cadets to launch an efficient counterattack. Yukino, seizing the opportunity, closed the distance and landed a direct hit on Peltrola. However, the strike wasn't enough to finish him off. Suddenly, one of Peltrola's clones launched a surprise attack, destroying the gadget in Yukino's hands. Sensing an opening, Peltrola lunged at Yukino, but Ishikawa bravely pushed her out of harm's way, taking a devastating hit that left a gaping hole in his body. Meanwhile, the junior keepers had managed to take down several clones, but the battle was far from over. Tokita lost his hand to Peltrola's attack, but Nadeshiko quickly used his regenerative powers to heal him. The 4 remaining clones, realizing they were losing ground, combined their powers to unleash a devastating attack aimed at wiping out the junior keepers once and for all. Tokita and Hisui valiantly blocked the attack, while Nadeshiko unleashed a powerful counterstrike that obliterated the clones. Suzukiri, who had been observing the battle closely, warned Peltrola of an impending danger, allowing one clone to escape, only for it to be swiftly finished off by the Pink Keeper, who had just arrived on the scene. In a desperate move, Peltrola took Yukino hostage, forcing D to surrender his weapon and order the others to do the same. Ekiabashi, unwilling to die, made a quick escape through a hole in the ceiling, while Urabi hesitated to drop her weapon. Cheyenne, trusting Dee's judgment, handed over his weapon. As Peltrola began to create an escape route for one of his clones, Ishikawa, who had been unconscious, suddenly awoke and distracted Peltrola. The earlier attack from Yukino finally took effect, cracking Peltrola's shell. Yamato immediately sprinted to pursue the escaping clone, but before it could get far, Akiabashi reappeared with Shippu, crushing one of the flying clones. In a coordinated effort, D, Cheyenne, and Urabi managed to deliver the final blow, defeating Peltrola. Elsewhere, the Red Keeper was engaged in a brawl with a group of thugs who were attempting to steal money when he received news of the situation. Among the thugs was Shogu, a formidable fighter and former student of the retired Blue Keeper. Deceived by his client, who turned out to be a monster, Shogu bore the scars of betrayal on his face. Now, as the current Blue Keeper, rehired by the Red Keeper, Shogu was exhausted from battling the seemingly endless clones. Just as two clones attacked Shogu, his subordinate, Kono, intervened, blocking the assault and handing Shogu his cartridge. With determination burning in his eyes, Shogu activated his divine artifact and delivered swift punishment to the clones, driven by his desire to avenge Ezome. Unbeknownst to him, Ezome had awakened in the hospital. As Shogu tended to Kono's wounds, D suddenly appeared before him, challenging him to a fight. 13 years ago, the fighters awoke within a mysterious floating fortress, tasked by their boss monsters with a mission of world domination. However, a few months later, their plans were shattered when the Dragon Keepers defeated the boss monsters. With their masters gone, the fighters were taken in by the Dragon Keepers, reduced to mere pawns. Yet, some, like XX, clung to the hope that their bosses would one day return. Desperate, XX descended into the depths to search for them, while D, humiliated by his reconstruction as a boss monster, suffered a bitter defeat at the hands of fake divine artifacts and rangers. In the present, D finally revealed his true face to the Blue Keeper, challenging him with a cold introduction. The Blue Keeper recognized him, but exhaustion weighed heavily from the battles he had already fought. Even so, he began charging his divine artifact. Unleashing a barrage of attacks on D skillfully deflected some of the attacks with his dragon gadget, which confused the Blue Keeper. But even the mighty dragon gadget paled in comparison to the divine artifact's power. As the battle raged on, D dodged the relentless attacks until he transformed into Kono, momentarily catching the Blue Keeper off guard. Despite his hesitation, the Blue Keeper blocked the attack, using his shield to deflect it back at D. Sensing an opportunity, D prepared for a frontal assault, only for his gadget to run out of energy at the worst possible moment. Just as D thought he had the upper hand, a sudden beam of light pierced through the Blue Keeper's neck. The attack had come from Peltrola. D held the Blue Keeper in his arms, urging him to stop joking around and fight seriously. But the Blue Keeper, accepting his fate, saw it as punishment for his past sins and neglect. He reverted to his normal form and collapsed, as Peltrola retreated into XX's body after warning D to reconsider his choices. XX, filled with remorse, apologized to D for betraying him, explaining that survival was the only way she knew. Meanwhile, the Red Keeper, traveling in a helicopter with a subordinate, seemed surprisingly unconcerned about Blue Keeper's death. His primary worry, the group's signature pose, was now ruined since Blue had the perfect height for it. Back on the ground, the junior keepers were in disbelief that the Blue Keeper could be defeated. Hisui, who had once been saved by him, was particularly shaken. Medics took away Ishikawa's body, while the Rangers rescued Koguma. D, disguised as Tsukurama, returned with the cadets. Cheyenne and the others vowed to eliminate the remaining monsters. Hisui was interviewed by news channels, recounting the harrowing battle with Peltrola, while Suzukiri and Tokita watched her lead from a cafe. During this time, one of the Rangers' subordinates was secretly feeding information to an unknown group when suddenly the Red Keeper appeared behind him. The traitorous Ranger tried to flee but was swiftly eliminated by the Red Keeper. Returning to the sacred banquet, the Red Keeper revealed that a traitor was hiding among the Rangers. Tokita, suspicious, confronted Suzukiri, asking why she was betraying the Rangers, but she remained silent. Meanwhile, D, reflecting on his unfair fight with the Blue Keeper, vowed to kill the remaining 4 keepers, determined to finish what he had started.